There we go. Now you've been around a while in this whole business.
Yep.
Um,
Early Jordan Peterson got me connected to you and your channel.
yeah, yeah. Shall we start with you?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, yeah, you're. I think that's normally where you start, right? I don't
It
think I've
is.
ever had a formal introduction to the channel.
Yeah, so I've picked up little bits and pieces of your story just through social media interactions, but why don't you go through it a little bit more fulsomely?
Okay. Let's see where to begin. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. I was considered myself a Jehovah's Witness until I was about, I would say, 20, about 20 years old. Um, my mother is still a Jehovah's Witness. My older brother is as well. But most of my other siblings are not doing it anymore. But
Hmm.
yeah, I kind of had a very unique experience as a witness. My mother grew up Catholic. She uh, she always said she hated it though. She was the oldest of seven children, and when um, she met my father at a young age. She was 18, I believe. He was a couple years older. He was actually working on the farm that her father was working on as like a hired hand or whatever. So they get married and they actually join. They become carnies for a little while. He was a truck driver, and they join this carny and we're going up and down the East Coast. And I think they only did that for a year or so because my mother got pregnant with my oldest brother shortly after that, and he was born in Florida. And then they had some issues with the people they were with, and they decided to leave the carny because that's not a great environment for children, especially in the 70s. This would be. Um, so they moved back home, back to Maryland, and they had a couple years later they had another. They had my older sister Kathy, and this is around the time that my mother actually the way she tells the story is that she was just terrified of the world. She had two little kids. She felt alone. My dad was a truck driver, so he was gone all the time. So she was kind of just terrified all the time. And then one day, she gets a knock on the door, and it's Jehovah's Witnesses. And they just kind of saying what she needed to hear at the time. That does the world feel horrible? Did there's what the Bible says about this, et cetera, et cetera. And she was raised Catholic and didn't even she felt like she didn't wasn't educated what the Bible actually said. So
Yeah,
when they started to reveal things to her that she had never gotten, she kind of like, hook, line, sinker. She was all in.
yeah.
Going a little fast. I'm getting winded here. So excuse me. My father never became a witness. He always said that he didn't oppose her, or he's fine with her educating us and everything that way. But he would come to like the memorial celebrations from time to time, but he never was interested in joining. Um, Trying to see how to get into this. Try to jump ahead. About 10 years or so this is now mid 80s, they decide to have more kids again. So they start over, and they plan for my older brother, and then a couple years later I come along, and then I have a younger sister too. And I think what kind of happened is my mother really decided to try and raise us like perfect Jehovah's Witness kids. um,
Um,
she wanted to just take us to the meetings. We went 3 times a week. We studied, their literature every day. Did all the kind of things as governments like to the T. We even later we actually hosted the Bible study, the weekly book study we have in our home, and we did that for probably 10 years. Um, so I've always felt like I've grown up in the world, but like I'm not allowed to be a part of it. I went to public school like normal kids, but I wasn't allowed to participate in like the extracurricular activities and that kind of stuff. And it just kind of felt very isolating, and you always were made to feel different because you were. Uh, I think it promotes living like a double life almost. You know that the
Mm.
world is full of that. What they put it is that the world is full of evil. Like Satan controls everything, and that everything has been corrupted, and that you should be no part of it, and that to good uh, good habits are spoiled by bad association is what they would say. Um, Sorry for the long pauses.
That's okay. I mean, if recording this is making you nervous, we could turn off the recording. Um,
No, I mean it's not making me. I mean I've talked about this before, but just uh,
and we
I
don't
don't.
have to share it either. I mean, it's
Okay.
up to you. These are hard things.
Yes,
I
I
mean,
agree. I
when
agree.
you're raised, I mean, parents are in some ways, you begin your relationship with them and they're these godlike beings and
Mhm.
the religion that they value so heavily and raise you in is a powerful, powerful thing. And so to decide to break that pattern, it's deeply affecting.
It is, yes. And I think the problem was that I believed it like the mythology of the Bible as they presented it so fully as a child.
Yeah.
And then but the institution is what failed me. And that
Hmm.
is what made me question the whole like how it originated, how it came about, what is this for? And it yeah, it's just very difficult to try to wrestle with these things
Yeah.
in this way. Um,
Was there an event that made you, it was sort of a breaking point for you, or just was it a slow realization that this isn't working for me, or what prompted your departure from?
so yes, it was not working because well, my father died when I was about 15.
Oh,
So after he passed away, we things obviously got a lot harder. My
yeah,
mother, was still very devout in her beliefs and everything like that, and still tried to maintain her same level of involvement in going out with the field service and doing all the kind of stuff. But obviously, life had to change, so that kind of abruptly changed a lot of stuff. Um, a couple years after that, unfortunately, my older sister Kathy committed suicide too. Um,
oh my,
so she had been struggling with bipolar disorder for many years, and that she had gone through these manic episodes back and forth, kind of ruining her life, keep putting things together. My mother had to gain custody of her daughter for most of her life because of her constant episodes and stuff like that. But after my father passed away, she really started to have depressive spirals instead of manic spirals, and one day she just kind of did the
yeah,
unthinkable. So after that, it was obviously uh, very hard for the whole family and everyone. Um, my mother obviously was struggling, and that's when I felt like the let's try to not feel bad almost sharing other people's personal stories, but I mean it's my story too, so I don't.
yeah.
I just try to decide what
What
to
to leave
share
in
and
and
what
what
not
to
to
take out.
share.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah. So like she obviously was struggling with all the changes and everything like that. I think the same month right before my sister committed suicide, her father had passed away too. So all of
Oh
these things
my.
just in a row, she was, obviously distraught. She met our neighbor. We were living in an apartment building at the time, and she just started to be friendly conversation with a neighbor, and they really kind of hit off and had a great relationship. He was single, he was divorced, and obviously she was single now, and so they really kind of found a good connection, and they decided they wanted to be together. But this was something that the witnesses forbid, because he wasn't a believer, and she had been a devout believer
Right.
for so many years, and they didn't
Unequally
seem to have any
yoked.
sympathy. What?
Unequally yoked.
Exactly. So they decided to disfellowship her when they at this time period. And so I completely, you know, had no. I completely stopped believing like in the organization, and I called myself an atheist and didn't believe in any of it, and thought that this is all just a scam. This is all just a means of controlling people, and that these people are not there to be what they say they are. They're your brothers and sisters. They're there to propagate this ideology only. And as long as you play the game and you say the words, you'll they'll pretend to be your friend.
Yeah.
Um, which is why I'm really, just to not make it personally about me, is why I'm really interested in your channel, because you guys all don't share ideologies. You guys disagree and bicker, but you seem to be still have loving friendship with one another. You have
Yeah.
some way to put that aside and still have some sort of community, even though we're trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Um, it isn't it isn't a the TLC is not a confessional church. It is
Yeah,
definitely not. It is
yeah,
there are people all over the place on all sorts of things. And but it is, I think that there is a sense for many people that the world is worth trying to figure out. And if you're going to figure it out, it's really helpful to do that in conversation with other people and other people
definitely.
that, while they'll have positions and postures and commitments, they won't necessarily have an axe to grind that they're going to leverage on the relationship and basically say, if you don't bend the knee to this thing that I have over here, you and I cannot be friends. And that seems to be sort of the working code of the TLC.
Yeah, that's quite sad, and I think that's something that is a holdover from church communities, is that you have to be protective of your community, and kind of leery of outside heresies or influences. So I understand that caution, but it's also, it creates kind of can create a toxic environment.
Yeah, yeah. And I was there was someone from the Jehovah's Witnesses in the UK who had in my experience, the witnesses vary a lot in terms of the degree to which they try to control their people.
Mm-hmm.
My experience in North America hasn't been tremendously controlling, that people seem to be able to get out if they want to without too many threats. There are other stories that I've heard from people in other places that it's quite a bit worse. So I suspect it probably varies from place to place depending on what community you're actually closely connected with. But I do know that they can. There's a member of my church who had a number of family members among the witnesses, and there was sometimes a lot of pressure to stay in the group, or you will, yeah, it'll be costly for you if you leave or somehow defy the group. So, yeah, but one of the things I was talking about the changes in the Christian Reformed Church over the last 50 years, and the cost of exit to be someone in the Christian Reformed Church was higher then too. Now nobody threatened you, or you wouldn't be invited to coffee at mom's or anything like that. There was nothing like that usually, but if you have a family group like that, it can be it can feel threatening and costly to decide to break away. So it's not uncommon.
Yeah, it is sadly not uncommon.
So what kind of where how old were you? What kind of life situation were you when you decided to just no longer participate, no longer identify with?
So I was about so I was falling out of it probably my whole late teens. Sure, yeah, definitely after my father died, I got very kind of nihilistic, very, angsty kind of kid, and I still participated. I still went to the meetings with my mother, kind of just do it to make her happy. It was kind of
Sure.
that kind of
You want to
that
support your mom. I mean, my
exactly.
goodness, what a
Yeah,
bunch of what a lot of loss she suffered.
exactly. Um, and so I was, I left high school. I got graduated high school, and I decided to go to art school because I wanted to be an artist. And that I enjoyed it, but my sister did
Yeah.
what she did when I was in my second year, and that kind
Mm,
of broke the whole family, and so I had to drop out of school. My mother, didn't she was supporting me with the school thing, and then she
yeah.
decided that she couldn't do that anymore,
Yeah.
and that she kind of just wanted to live her own life now, and she was
Mm,
uh you know tired of being a mother and tired of being dependent on people, and she just wanted to like start over. It's kind of how she said it. um
yeah. Which is tough for you in college because
yes.
college is sort of a weird time where you're increasingly independent, but depending on the particular circumstances, not fully independent. So, and
Yeah.
then also when you have the loss of a father, you have the tragic loss of a sister in a terribly tragic way, and she has a child that your mother is now having to raise. I mean, parents have dreams and feelings too, and sometimes, especially that many kids, yeah, I can understand why she made the kind of decision she made.
Yes, and looking back on it now, obviously it took me many years to stop being bitter and angry about it. But
Mm,
I've obviously have more sympathy now that I'm older. But I mean, it worked out for the best because this is why I'm not still negative and pessimistic about it. I try to reflect now that things did work out for the best because
mm,
at that time period, I met my wife. My wife was we actually were together since high school. It was my senior year in high school. We had a couple art classes together, and we just kind of fell for one another. And not to give a lot of her information away, but she's from a horrible family too, and
um,
she with her family was also falling apart right around the same time, right before mine did. And so my family adopted her right in and kind of accepted and took her in and was
yeah,
caring. And she even was interested in the Jehovah's Witnesses and was coming to meetings and stuff with like all
yeah.
that with us. Um, and so we got married really young. We got married at, I was 19, she was 18.
Wow, that is young.
And yeah, so we committed to one another. And so that was kind of like the best decision we ever made
Mm,
because as our families fell apart around us, we kind of just committed to one another 100%. We were like, I'm never going to lie to you. Everyone's lied to us our whole life. I'm
yeah,
never going to do that to you. I feel so
yeah,
betrayed by everyone I loved. I will never do that to you. And she,
yeah.
felt the exact same way. And
Mm.
so we've had a, fantastic 18 years of marriage so far. And
Wonderful.
so,
Any
uh,
kids?
so that, not yet. No, we're
Okay.
still in the deciding phase. We're kind of at that cutting point where they're going to do it or not do it. And,
Yeah,
we kind of were planning on it. And then COVID happened and the world went upside down. And so
yeah,
it seems a lot harder now
yeah.
to kind of consider something like that.
What have you
But
done career-wise?
so because I wanted to be an artist my whole life, I've been drawing my whole life. But because I had to drop out of art school and we were newlywed, we were kind of just on our own now. We just had to find jobs and survive.
Yeah.
So I started working at Best Buy of all places, selling computers.
Yep.
She started working at a local grocery store, and we got our own little apartment by ourselves, and just kind of just had to survive. Just kind
Yeah.
of figured out on our own. It's kind of just pushed into the deep water, and you got to swim. You got to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, from there, I went from Best Buy. I worked there for a year or so, and which was kind of fortunate that they had some weird program where they were going to decide to try and make a video game. And so they put out an email to all of well, it's not just a video game. They were having this whole like extracurricular, get community engagement with technology, kind of educate the public kind of thing they wanted to do. And so they put out emails to the whole company. If you have any kind of skills or interest in doing this project, sign up, and you can not just work in the store, you could come work and do this. So I signed up, and actually as an artist, because I had just gotten out of art school, and I was like, I can draw, I can paint, I can design stuff. I wanted to do like concept art for video games and stuff like that. And so I put in a portfolio, and I got accepted. Um, so I started doing that for the first probably about 2 years, which was really cool. It did not pay very well, but I got to work remotely. I got to work from home for 2 years, and so that was really cool. Um, but then Best Buy, they had some financial issues. Their stock plummeted, and they decided to kill all these kind of extra programs. So that program got axed really before it got off the ground. So we worked a couple years on this project. It ended up going nowhere, and then kind of we just had to go back to the store. So I
Oh
worked on this
man.
project.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah. So I had to go work the day job at Best Buy. I needed a job, but I now had some art experience, so I started to start freelancing, and so I just built a portfolio and started, doing illustration and concept art and just any kind of job I could get. I even got an agent for a little while, and they were getting me some like children's books and stuff like that. But I was never able to support myself 100%
Yeah.
doing that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I still kept the day job in Best Buy.
Yeah.
And what I actually did is that they had Geek Squad as part of Best Buy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I didn't like selling computers, but I could fix them, and I liked working on them.
Yeah.
So I eventually applied up there, got transferred up there, and kind of worked my way through the whole Geek Squad. I did every job almost in the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
I worked there for like almost 10 years,
Yeah.
and I met a lot of great people. And a couple of those people had gotten recruited out of Geek Squad into larger IT companies. And so there was this one IT company that was just gobbling up a bunch of people from our store. And eventually I just went along too. And
Oh,
I've been with
wonderful.
this IT company now for about 7 years. And we just do IT for a bunch of different businesses.
Yep. 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 Oh, wonderful. Well, yeah, that's kind of the way it goes. Just you got to start somewhere, and you just keep swimming up the stream.
Yeah, the opportunities are there. You just got to, seek them out,
Yeah.
make the
Yeah.
connections. That's really kind of what you learn in life is it's more of
Yeah.
who you know than your degrees or anything.
So you found what did you found me through Peterson, the Peterson pipeline.
Yeah, yeah,
What
yeah.
did what
Peterson was
about
really
go ahead. What about
good.
Peterson sort of grabbed your attention?
That was really kind of a key moment for me with when Peterson was coming around because I was getting I was just kind of depressed at that point in life. I was
Mm,
in my like mid to late 20s, was 2017, 2016.
yeah.
And yeah, I needed to clean my room, right? So that was his big message. So he kind of emerged on the scene and kind of just kind of gave me that motivation to kind of just see things differently.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just him. It was more like Joe Rogan started the whole thing. Joe Rogan, I discovered his podcast, and he had just had a whole kind of just introduced a whole world of things that I'd never considered before. Um, uh, one big one. It was like right around the same time as Jordan Peterson's. I found through Rogan Terrence McKenna and Jordan Peterson at the same time, and they're both completely opposite people, but they were saying very similar things to very different audiences. And I was absorbing a lot of their lectures around the same time, and I was seeing all these kind of like parallels of what they were talking about, and just how it all connected to religion and everything and psychology and consciousness and all of this stuff. And so that really kind of fueled my fire to get back into this whole side of spirituality that I completely wrote off and dismissed for, for obvious reasons.
Well, well, I mean, you found Peterson and then you found me, and you've stuck around here for a while. Now, certainly on one hand, the sticking around indicates, as you said, we're not, nobody's going to lean on you to try to sell you too hard into orthodoxy or Calvinism or biblical Unitarianism or what have you. Um, but at the same time, a lot of we are having a lot of conversations that tend to swirl around religion. And of course, McKenna and Peterson did too. So what sort of has kept you here?
Um, I think I just enjoy. Hmm, it's a good question. What has kept me here? I don't know. There's one level. There's comfort. Obviously, I kind of know the characters around here, um, and not a lot of people are having the kind of differences of perspective in one place. Like there's
Mm.
a lot of communities online where like you can go and you can talk to, just the ortho bros or just the Gnostics or just the psychedelics or whatever. But there's not a lot of mixing where you can have an estuary, like you call it, where
Yeah,
these things mix together and you can kind of get weird interactions.
yeah.
And I like the weird, and so I kind of just hang around. Um, I don't know. I enjoy Sam a lot just because he's so adamant about trying to convince people on something he's never going to convince people. So I enjoy his ever, his Sisyphus attempt to push that up the hill and his new ways of trying to figure out, to convince people that, his perspective is correct. It's entertaining. I enjoy it. I'm willing to be convinced. It's just
Here you go, Sam. You've got a shot. You got a shot. Maybe you get somebody. Oh, that's funny. I'm sure Sam will have fun with that. Well, what do you want to talk about? You reached out to me, and I know you've been hanging around a while, so I was curious to get a little bit more of your story. I knew that you had, a history in the Jehovah's Witness, and I knew that you had left it. And obviously via Twitter and comments, and you've jumped into a few streams here and there. Um,
mhm.
I get a little sense of it, but yeah, but I'm curious why you reached out and what you really want to sort of pursue, or did you want to just probe a little bit on some things?
I guess I mean I could just probe a little bit. I don't really have an agenda or anything like that. I do have a graphic novel that's coming out. I sent you the PDF of,
Oh, that's
but
right.
yeah,
Yeah, now I remember. Yep, yep.
yeah.
That was interesting. Um, well, talk
So
about it, moment.
so I've really been trying to. I One of the things that made me kind of wash my hands of the Bible and wash my hands of Christianity was the kind of the Sam Harris Dawkins approach that the Genesis account is ridiculous. This is all made up, Bronze Age mythology. There's no reason to take any of this seriously. Um, and that's kind of like I was convinced by that argument. But I it wasn't until like the emergence of Peterson and Pajot has been kind of interpreting things symbolically that kind of have reawakened and made me kind of want to return to these ideas because I think there is a lot of symbolic depth and truth in the stories now that isn't read on a literal by the description of the words, but it's a poetic compression of events to convey something very real that is, we're trying to preserve it forever. This is something that it was probably only, yeah, it was probably only orally available to people for most of human history. So it had to be short, it had to be memorized. And we then try to look at it now written down and say, well, this short little story is not a complete description of the whole universe, so clearly it must be wrong. But I see it more as like a zip file that should be unpacked and kind
Hmm.
of and looked at in a deeper way. And so I've kind of been imagining like a reconstruction of what the world looked like at the very beginning of when Genesis is beginning, and trying to get a deeper understanding of humanity from our clearly we were an animal that's been here for hundreds of thousands if not millions of years, but this adventure with God only began recently.
Hmm.
So there has to be some accounting of that, I think.
Hmm.
And so I don't think we're going to argue from the Bible or argue our way from some founding father of the church to convince people. But I think if we can create a new mythos, a new imagination for people to live in, or to grapple with, that kind of makes the world of the Bible more real, well then I think they can accept it easier. And I think that's what's failing in the culture, is that no one accepts the Bible as real, or at least the mythos of the Bible, or the world it presents as what we see in history.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting the ways in which so as a pastor, obviously you're working with people with the Bible and it's always interesting to me the way people sort of try to get into the Bible with respect to their imagination. So I was in Italy a couple summers ago, and of course, if you go to Florence, um, and Rome, you will be awash in Renaissance, Renaissance art, which, sort of in the early phases, they're doing a lot of biblical material for churches, but of course their biblical material for churches looks like it's set in um, Florentine Italy.
Yeah,
Which of course then when we look at it, you tend then to locate it in Florence, Italy in your imagination. But then when, let's say, Hollywood, a la The Chosen or House of David, tries to get at it, they then sort of take a anthropological historical approach and try to, well, we want to sort of photo reconstruct what this must have looked like at 1000 1200 BC in Egypt or um, Judea. And you can do that, but it one of the things that drove me, long before I found Peterson, sort of drove me to Lewis actually, was the experience of preaching and but trying to figure out how the imaginations of the congregation who would listen to my sermons would sort of appropriate what I was doing. And there's something to be said for what the Renaissance artists tried to do in terms of bringing it in real. And of course, any art, people will notice that the Renaissance, painters put their enemies and friends into the pictures.
yes.
And,
Yeah. Or they're
and
outraged because I think what Caravaggio used a prostitute for Mary, and the Pope was
yeah,
pissed off about that.
yeah, yeah. So it's a really important thing to try to think about how exactly we engage with these stories. I'm going to talk to Martin Shaw late next week again about his book, and so I'm making my way through his book, and his book is really about this question of, at least the early part of the book that I'm in right now, it's really about the question of myth and what is myth and what is it for in the lives of everyday people. And so, one of the interesting things for me has been, I mean, I'm older, graphic novels sort of came, when I was a kid, you'd have superhero comic books, but they were mostly seen as sort of kids, young boys things. And then, of course, American commercial being what it is, they try to always expand and keep audiences, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, the graphic novel has become something which is much different than the comic book was when I was, say, 8 years old.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, Tolkien's influence and Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth, the development of the fantasy genre. Um, yeah, there's a lot going on there. So with your graphic novel that you're doing, tell me a little bit more about where this, I mean, you're certainly participating in a space. Um, why? I mean, is it just fun for you, or you have a sense of mission about it, or where's that at for you?
I mean, it's certainly, I guess I feel inspired to do it. I've struggled to figure out what I wanted to do with my art career.
Mm,
I did freelancing for a lot of time. It's great to get paid to make art in the beginning, but then yeah, I ended up not liking it just because you're constantly at the whim of whoever's paying you, and whether it's you're making something good or bad, you're just doing it for the paycheck. And I kind of got burnt out on doing that, especially around the pandemic. I was like, why am I, putting everything seemed so uncertain during when that happened 2020. So I was like, why am I putting my efforts into making other people's things when I have a story I want to tell. I have ideas that I'm wrestling with that I want to get out in some way, that I want to participate in, and I want to somehow do that. And so that's kind of led me through this exploration, and and that's probably why I've stuck with this community, because Peterson is kind of what led me to Carl Jung, and Terence McKenna also talked a lot about Jung, and he had this technique that he developed called active imagination, where he used to explore his own unconscious, his own subconscious, and he used this as the base to kind of like dream while he's awake. And he would record these dreamlike adventures and interact with all these dreamlike characters, and then he used this to kind of like analyze. He said this was the foundation of his later psychological work. Um, I kind of discovered that I could do a similar type thing with drawing, where I could take a blank page and I could just kind of go into like a very meditative blank mindset and just start scribbling on the page until then I saw something, and whatever the first image that emerged, I would just commit to it, draw it, and finish whatever the idea was. And through a practice of just doing this with kind of no intent on what it ended up being, I kind of constructed this kind of mythological set of characters, this whole kind of like worlds of worlds that I was kind of discovering just through doing this practice. And it linked me back to the Bible, and it linked me back to Genesis, and it linked me back to Adam and Eve. And I hated that story because that was the story that kind of made me dismiss all religion, because I thought this was complete make believe. And the way that the witnesses had set up what Jesus was meant to do was that Adam and Eve sinned, and so because they were sinned, we're all imperfect, and because we're imperfect, Jesus had to come and he had to die as a perfect sacrifice in order to redeem man. And now that he died for us, we are redeemed, and we can have redemption again and be saved, but only because he gave his perfect blood sacrifice. God is happy now, and he'll redeem the rest of humanity. Essentially, the And so I was like, well, if Adam and Eve didn't exist, we've been evolving on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years, and they say, we're only been here for 9,000 years or 6,000 years or whatever it is. Clearly, this story is make believe, and if that's make believe, well, there's no reason for Jesus to come and die for any sin. So even if he was a real person, I don't accept that he had to die for some cosmic balance of perfection for our sins or anything like that. So I'd kind of dismissed this story. When it came back to it, it was from the perspective of Genesis 1. Maybe you're a pastor, so you can tell me if I'm completely wrong here or not. Genesis 1, at the sixth day of creation, God makes man and woman, and he tells them, domesticate the animals, I give you all the fruits of the trees, go forth and be plenty. And then he rests on the seventh day. That's the end of chapter 1. So the way I was told was that the figures in chapter 1, that's Adam and Eve, is just a condensed story, just a condensed version of Adam and Eve story. And then the second chapter is the longer version of the Adam and Eve story. From what I've see, and there can be, if in that first day of creation, if man, whatever the or the first 6 days of creation, wherever we get to the planet as it is, with animals on it, with and then out of all of these animals, then man is created. We could have been here for hundreds of thousands of years as just animals, or closer to the animals, just living, procreating, doing all the stuff that normal animals do. What I think really distinguishes Adam, and which is why I think a key part of the Genesis 2 story that is often overlooked, is the naming of the animals. Is that I don't think you can. What Adam is the first human that can speak a language. I think before Adam is created, humans were on Earth, but they weren't. There was no man, because there was no word for man. Everyone was just communicating through either sign language, through body language, through maybe song or something like that. But they didn't have these higher level of cognition, of abstraction, of thinking about the world. And so the story of Adam is the story of a garden being secluded from the rest of the planet, and one man being made. And before even Eve comes along, he says, name all these animals. And you don't have language without names. That was actually something, I don't know if it was, I think it was on your channel many years ago. You covered an article, The Man Without Words, I think. It was about a South American man who didn't have any concept of language. He was born mute, and he was living with another mute community. And he had an aha moment where suddenly he realized, oh, there are names for things. And that was kind of like the eureka moment that allowed him to learn sign language, even though he had grown up his whole life without any concept of language. So I think that there's something very key psychologically to, you have to be able to construct names and assign names for things to even have a language. And then once there is a language, well, then you can have a partner. And that's then when Eve is created as his partner. Excuse me.
I've never heard anybody sort of roll this out, but it's very interesting.
This is just, I've never heard anyone say this either. This is just my ideas.
Yeah. But I mean, you have a point. You have a point. Now I don't know. But it's a very interesting argument. I've never heard anybody make it, which is amazing, because if there's any part of the Bible that's trodden over, it's the first few chapters of Genesis. So to hear a new point about it is, it's noteworthy.
Yeah. Well, this is why I love Terence McKenna, and I still am. A lot of religious people probably won't, but he really kind of talked about the mystery and the evidence of something divine in this world is language. We don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
We don't know what it's doing to us,
Yeah.
and it seems like it had just emerged on this planet maybe 40,000 to 10,000 years ago, and now we're on a course towards maybe going to the whole universe. And we don't have an explanation for this materialization of this thing that is changing us. And we were
Yeah.
animals like everything else, and now we're not. And there's only thing that's different is that we have language and no one else does.
Yeah. Even though animals communicate to a degree with sound, but it's
Yes.
nothing like we have. And
Yes, it's
and
not.
our capacity for abstraction. I was actually just thinking about this, something similar to this, today or yesterday. I was pondering, I was thinking about Owen Barfield's, a lot of his observations. And let's see, what was it? I was listening to, I was, there definitely is collective evolution in terms of our capacities. Um, and we tend to see, we tend to, as a group, be able to do things that it's not clear previous generations could do like we can. So there certainly is some degree of development, and a lot of that development seems deeply tied to language, but not just language as such, but the relationship between language and the rest of our existence. And so you get this sort of, even in Christian history, you, I was poking at, well, I was doing some writing. It's somewhat in the video too, where there's sort of a difference between, let's say, Catholicism. Catholicism and Orthodoxy can tend to be deeply procedural in a way that, let's say, Protestantism doesn't tend to be as much. Now, there's a great degree of overlap with all, and I wouldn't say that the Orthodox and Catholics aren't confessional or aren't propositional, because they certainly are, and that Protestants aren't procedural. But there's a question of emphasis, and I got that a little bit with the musings about um, why Protestant churches police themselves propositionally, confessional churches tend to, in the way that they do. Whereas it seems for some, as long as you show up to take the mass or sit for the liturgy, you're pretty much free to think and say what you want, and nobody's going to really challenge you. So, and if you see that kind
Yeah.
of development, communal development and change between groups, what does that say about how different groups are using language and how it connects to the material side of life differently? Because part of what happens with, let's say, as the propositionalism is getting threadbare, is we begin to realize that a lot of the simplistic syllogisms that people wanted to sort of create between languages. You'd see this in, let's say, the translation of something like the King James Version. There definitely was sort of a, this word means this word, this word means this word, this word means this word. And later translations sort of understood that the meaning of the text is not necessarily just sort of located in the words, although it's not that the words are unimportant, but they're also located in the sentences and in the phrases and even in the books, because the language that is in one particular book in the Bible they can use the same word, but because of its context in that book, it'll be understood with some different nuance. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and your point about naming, it's just really interesting. And because,
I think there's a.
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't know, but you were talking, and this kind of point kind of clicked in my head because the second part of what you just said, the second part of the story is when after Eve arrives, then the serpent shows up and tempts her, and he asks her, you know, she tells the serpent, we can't eat that fruit. We can't even touch it or we'll die.
Right.
God never told Adam she couldn't touch it. If you read just a few sentences earlier, he told
Yep.
Adam just don't eat this. He didn't say anything
Right.
about touching it.
Yep.
So somehow in the communication between Adam and Eve, even when they're perfect, even in the garden, he somehow embellished, he somehow told her, hey, don't even touch it. So that, like you said, so the proposition, this thing emerged out of that proposition. It was like, just don't go near it, don't touch it, don't eat it, don't have any association with it. And that was enough for the serpent to get in there and be like, you can touch it, like you can eat it, like you're fine. And I always found it weird that she ate it and was fine immediately. It wasn't until Adam ate it that his eyes were opened.
Yeah.
So I just wonder that was he just the one not allowed to eat it? Like God gave the first set of humans all the trees. He didn't say you don't eat of anything. He said he gave you everything. He didn't directly tell Eve anything. She ate it, was fine. It really just Adam that was not allowed to eat this fruit, and it was just Adam specifically. And so this is kind of where I've gotten this idea kicking around. I'm not trying to claim this is what the Bible says or means or anything, but this got my imagination spinning, because if Adam is the first creator of language, he makes the first language, he names all the Adam. He's the when he eats the fruit, he's communing with the tree. The tree becomes a part of him, and he becomes a part of the tree. And I think that is the kind of key that we are just starting to understand how conscious and how in control of the planet the trees actually are.
Hmm.
And that I don't know if there's a lot people who are up on botany, but there is a lot of new discoveries in plant and fungal communication, and that they seem to be we said that humans are the only things with language, but
Yeah.
they seem to be communicating on a like a gene language level. They can
Yeah.
they can infiltrate the genetics of each other, turn certain
Yeah.
genes on and off. They can pass resources between each other in these kind of nodal networks that are showing levels of intelligence that we are just now building into our IT systems, are building into our data centers. Apparently, underground, these organisms have been doing it for millions, if not billions, of years already. And so, just the fantasy element I've woven into my mythic universe is to kind of, and this is something that Terrence McKenna wanted people to grapple with, is that the plants actually might be more conscious than we give them credit for, and that when we are going into these psychedelic states with these plant medicines, and we are just hallucinating, or people are just saying this is just a trip, but he took it actually very seriously. This could be a direct message from this organism.
Hmm.
We don't have a way of knowing how an alien would communicate with you, and we're talking about going into space and meeting space aliens, and we think that they'll be like an animal that can talk to us, but we're related to trees. Can we talk to trees? Like an
Yeah.
alien's going to be even more alien than a plant or a fungus would be, and we don't even think of them on the level of conscious. And apparently they've been conscious and communicating for a very long time, and we're just now getting in on the game. So I've kind of want to create this reimagined mythic world that kind of weaves this idea of like the plants and the fungi being conscious characters in the game of humanity, and in our emergence and evolution, and our uh, struggling with God, because I think that element has been erased from the human story.
Yeah. It's interesting, Tolkien, of course, in Lord of the Rings has the relationship. Tolkien, of course, loved trees, but the relationship between the elves and the trees.
Yeah,
And it's certainly clear that there's lots of communication going on in the animal kingdom. I mean, the little bee dances that they do, and now
yeah,
they're sort of discovering the kind of communication that plants, even the wars and the conflict that plants have in terms of how they're competing for resources. And then, where are we in that dance if you would look at the dominion which is given to us in Genesis chapter 1. you'd have to then say, well, part of that dominion, certainly we chop down trees and we replant trees and we graft trees. And I mean, so we've extended a degree of dominion over them. But the part of what's interesting with Tolkien is that the way of elven magic is less, I'd say less violating than the kind of dominion that we tend to express over plants and animals. We tend to
Yeah,
blunt
definitely.
force them um, more than, you know, invited into the subtlety of
That's
if
how
you
most people
truly,
deal with other humans.
yeah, yeah, no, that's right. And we recognize the difference between, let's say, violence, which is sort of the blunt force, and then the much subtler, patient, but I'd say more powerful arts of communication, rhetoric. I mean, you know, what we're doing now, where we're influencing each other. And you know, even, you know, the obviously John 1, the prologue of John 1 is deeply tied to Genesis
Yeah.
1. And, you know, I've been going through the Gospel of John this year in terms of the, you know, the church calendar. And I mean, the Gospel of John is just a, it's just an insane literary masterpiece, the Gospel of John.
Mhm.
I was in seminary when, um, I remember my seminary Gospels class, my professor starts getting into John, and it was like, and then I figured out where he's getting a bunch of his stuff from, which was, you know, Raymond Brown was already his commentary was already out then, and then you start just realizing how these things are working, and it's almost when you look at great literary artistry, it's not necessarily dissimilar to the inkling we have about how trees and animals communicate, because they basically communicate in terms of networks. And when you look at
Mhm.
how all the symbolism and connections that are in something like the Gospel of John, you begin to see that the story is a network, that it's networks of concepts and ideas that are being brought together in a different way. And that way it's sort of like cooking. Because with
Yeah.
cooking, we take all of these different things, we add heat, we use time, you know, differences in temperature, differences in dilution, you know, um, um, mixtures of different things. So yeah, yeah. And in story, I mean, in storytelling and story creation, I mean, when you're doing a graphic novel, you're not only using the the literary aspects, but you're also obviously using the visual aspects.
Mhm.
Um, so no, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And I don't think I don't think it's the case that we haven't, you know, because when I look at something like movies, there you have music, which is itself a tremendously powerful thing, and then you add images, and you add narrative, and you know, other visual artistry, and then video games, of course, in some ways take that to another level where you have narrative participation.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's pretty amazing. We're pretty amazing. We're pretty amazing. People are pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, language is completely. What's it? The medium is the message, as what's his
McLuhan.
name would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, McLuhan. So the way that it's kind of building on top of itself, and that it's people are growing up inside these new language systems and these new technologies, and it's having effects on people that they have no real way of knowing how it's kind of changing us all, and we just hope it's for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And even Jess made a little short from my conversation at Midwestuary with Jonathan and John. And, you know, even better continues to develop amongst us, our
Hmm.
realization of what is better and what isn't, and the relationship between better and time. Something might seem like it's better now, but, you know, as you're, you know, continuing to process your story, something that didn't seem good then now suddenly seems integral to the development of who you are. I was Ben Sass is making the rounds now on some podcasts, and he's got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he quotes something that Tim Keller had said, which was pretty dramatic. Um, Tim was very clear that pancreatic cancer is not good,
Hmm.
but he wouldn't want to go back to his prayer life pre-cancer because the cancer did something to his intimacy with God that it seemed only the terror of cancer could provoke for him. So,
Yep, it's kind of the paradox of what we see in the Bible and what we see in life is that you and kind of it seems like tragedy inspires people, and the when God really comes to people is when they need it the most. And so in it's kind of a double-edged sword if you want to create Christians that you want to kind of insulate them from the world and protect your children to grow up in this safe Christian environment. But the Bible repeatedly shows that like those who are, the suffering, the orphans, the widows, those who are truly, God's friends, and that he loves them and will and comfort them. So are you insulating your children from by trying to protect them from all that? From Are you insulating them from Jesus? Are you insulating them
yeah.
from God? It's kind of it's a weird paradox.
Well, and as a parent, you wrestle with that because on one hand, you don't want to see your children suffer. And when your
Hmm.
children suffer, you suffer with them. At the same time, I also know that, as you said, suffering so often provokes the kind of growth and development that we find exemplary and priceless. And, it's interesting, listening to you talk. One of the gifts undoubtedly you gained through your time with Jehovah's Witnesses is at least a certain, people will debate the interpretation, but at least I can talk to you about Bible stories and you know them because
Yeah,
you
yeah,
learned
yeah.
the
That's very
Bible.
true. I had
And
to reread it multiple times.
that's right. And I mean, there's a real gift in that. Even as
It's
you're
true.
no longer a Jehovah's Witness, you have that code that has been put into you.
Hmm.
And, one of the things that many have noted about Western civilization now is that with the dechurching and the rise of secularism, increasing members of a generation are completely ignorant of just even a knowledge of the Bible. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to engage artistically with our tradition and our civilization without that because it's been so
Hmm.
absolutely central to our cultural development.
Yep.
So, and it's also different. I mean, you and your wife don't have any children yet. Children change their parents, and they often change them with respect to even the parents' own decisions to participate in a a religious community. And your story of your mother is interesting that maybe have another set in order to start over and maybe sort of correct some of the stuff that we had. So, address some of the regrets, I'll put it that way. Address some of the
Yeah.
regrets that we had with cluster number one. Um,
Exactly.
so it's interesting in your case because on one hand, you've definitely seen the the downsides of a tight religious community. And
Hmm.
and that tightness, as with, let's say, a marriage, there are people who have very loose marriages that they don't the husband and wife, they might share a home, they might share some finances, but for the most part, they're sort of living their own separate lives. Um, they don't have a lot in common, especially without children. It's easier to do that because once kids come, especially if you get more than one or two, then suddenly it's, at least for a number of years, it's all hands on deck. And
Hmm.
but the and that's true of religion too, where there's a value in the container and the solidity of the container and even the pressure there that produces things that, let's say, a loose religious attachment wouldn't produce. Now, that can obviously go bad and it can be very painful and cause trauma. But at least at this point, it sounds like you haven't really, you've decided to not pursue something like that again in your life so far.
At this time, I'm just very skeptical of all church communities. Like I am fascinated by the conversations I hear in this community in this corner. I am probably the most convinced by the Orthodox argument of Christianity, and I have consumed enough of their content to know of like the rituals and the liturgy and kind of like the at least the internet's expectation of what being a good Orthodox person is.
Yeah,
Um, but at the same time, it feels I just have such an aversion of joining groups because it feels like you're playing a pretend, like you're just I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the things you're doing and kind of accept this identity. And maybe that would be good for me, but I've always kind of just been a very independent kind of I just want to do it my way type
yeah,
person,
yeah,
and I'm just very skeptical of any church community. I guess just kind of from what I saw growing up, it's just I would never feel like it's genuine. I guess there were always I would always second guess the like okay, are we just being Christian and we're just being nice and neighborly and things like that, and you know but I guess relationships are they bear fruit when they're tested. So you kind of
yeah,
have to establish a relationship, and then if something happens, that's when people reveal themselves to you.
yeah,
And it's just unfortunate that the people that I grew up around, the people that I thought were my close relatives in the religion were not there for me when I needed it, or
yeah.
not for yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very real thing. That's a very real thing. And yeah, and
And
it
I guess that is also something that the witnesses kind of beat out of you as like I'm sure as a Christian, going Sunday, taking communion, and doing the ritual stuff like that is like your expression of worship. Um, but for the witnesses, they tell you that your expression of worship is preaching their stuff, is going out in field service. It's not going to church on Sundays. You get a lesson, you get some counseling, and you get some fellowship and stuff like that. But the real worship is going out and participating, trying to evangelize, try to that's actually doing the work that God wants you to do. And so to then go to church on Sunday and do this ritual and do the communion and stuff like that, it just I've never understood the necessity for doing a ritual to God. I guess maybe you can help
mm.
me with that.
Well, rituals are sneaky things. They shape us in ways we don't see sometimes for a long time. And one of the things that I've noted watching people who say have left the faith a long time ago, and let's say maybe they're in close relationship with someone who didn't, there is sort of an accumulative impact of having a ritual and a routine. We certainly know that biologically, um,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what we eat and what we do. And I think that's definitely true of us psychologically, that we are, in the words of Grim Grizz, we do program ourselves, that we do allow set to program us. And so it would stand to reason that the the ritual, the routine, the discipline that happens in religious communities also has an impact over time, but it could be subtle and it could be cumulative. And so, tends to lead us to have a degree of caution about it because yeah, you are being formed by those habits and rituals and routines. So you'd better have it be formed into something important. And the kinds of hierarchies like you discovered, like you articulated already. Yeah, you can go to the Kingdom Hall and get the teaching, but in terms of their hierarchy, their real work is the field work, which
Hmm.
which is interesting. And there are certainly Protestant groups that, let's say, place it at similar hierarchies or at least independence. But one of the things with the Jehovah's Witnesses is that yeah, it's pretty clear that's high in their hierarchy because what tends to happen with the communities that over time those hierarchies do get expressed and other things will drop off except sort of the main point. And
Hmm.
so yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And people in my experience go back to church or even go to church for the first time often because something's happened and they just have a sense that maybe this thing can help me with that thing in my life. And even your mother's experience with her experience in Catholicism, and that's not an uncommon story, especially around the time frame that I would imagine your mother was, where a lot of traditional Catholicism. I was listening to Neil Daedalus just talked with Will, who was a friend of Nick Freerillian, and it was on Nick's live stream the other night. And Will basically said a story that I had heard many times that many Catholics or former Catholics, cradle Catholics, had said it on my channel that they grew up in the Catholic Church. They very much got the message that the Bible isn't for lay people to read, just listen to the priest. And then once they find usually a Protestant who is knowledgeable in the Bible and can sort of open up what the Bible has to offer, people find that to be a profoundly powerful experience. And so they tend to pursue churches where the Bible is, being used. And I think in some ways, the way the Protestant context in America has shaped Catholicism is that the Catholics just have to up their Bible game. Because if they
Yeah.
don't up their Bible game, the Protestants are going to continue to eat them for lunch. And now the Orthodox are sort of coming in and saying, well, you're probably going to have to up your artist game and you're going to have to up your liturgical game. And, um, it's interesting to me that a lot of the people who have gone to Orthodoxy go there from a Protestant background. So they already have the Bible. Now, what's going to be interesting is going to be where is the next generation or the generation after that with respect to it?
Yes.
Because what we tend to see among these groups are intergenerational cycles, both within the churches and between the churches. And I think I think the secularism is involved in that cycle as well,
Hmm.
because secularists have, and I think will continue to get involved with religious groups.
Yeah.
And many of the people that I've had conversations with were raised completely secular, maybe Christmas and Easter, if that, or a few times visiting with other childhood friends. But then they begin to realize, oh, that isn't just a kind of the easy dismissal of the new atheists. There's something there. And many people have found tremendous value in it, as in fact your mother have. What happened? What happened with respect to your mother and that guy? Did she pursue a relationship with him? And
Yes, they end up getting married. They're still married to this day. They got married. Um, and she has gone back. She's become a witness again. She's been reinstated,
They let her
but
back in.
they did eventually let her back in, I believe. Now, my mother and I haven't had a very great, close relationship in many years, so I don't know how much she participates in it anymore. But I she did invite me to the memorial a couple of years ago, and I didn't go, but she extended the invitation. So
Okay.
I know she's back into it. My oldest brother is still in it. He's still an active participant.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah,
But
and
yeah.
and as a pastor, you just realize that you do see patterns, but at the same time, people are all over the map.
Hmm.
And when you find a pattern, you can almost always find a counterexample.
Yeah, that's true. People are complex. That's kind of the weirdness of humans is that you can have a household and all the children are exposed to the same parents, but they can respond in completely 180 ways
Yeah,
to what's happening in the household.
yeah,
So yeah, there is no, which is ultimately kind of funny in where all these conversations about formation and teaching your kids and ultimately nature's going to do what they want. They're going to pursue their own interests. They're going to educate themselves more or less, or their peers are going to educate them more than anything.
yeah,
So you kind of just, I'm not a parent, so this is not good advice to give, but you got to let God, it's in God's hand ultimately. You got to just have
yeah,
faith that he'll bend things towards the good ultimately. If
yeah,
enough bad things happen to you, like I said, if I can look back on all the terrible stuff and still be kind of grateful because I'm happy with things now, then I kind of have to accept that that is kind of how God operates, that he will slowly kind of turn things towards the good.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, what should we do with this? You want me to send this to you and have you look it over, or is it something that you'd want me to share, or where are you at so far?
I mean, yeah, I don't think I've said anything. I mean, other than the dead air in the beginning, I feel kind of bad for you, but I don't think I don't think I said anything that's gonna
Well, I don't think
embarrass
I
me or
didn't
anything like
I
that.
didn't experience it as dead air. I experienced it as this is stuff that is important and weighty
Mm,
and still in you. So that
yeah,
was communication too, even without words, that
yeah.
this isn't something you're flippant about, and it's not something you should be flippant about. So
It's
I
something I definitely don't share with a lot of people. I've in my life only told a handful of people about my childhood and about growing up a witness and things like that. So it
yeah,
is definitely something that I still am not 100%. I'm still wrestling with. I'm still maybe
yeah,
that's also why I haven't joined anything else because I'm still feeling God's presence and still trying to figure out things myself and still wrestling. So I'm still
yeah.
trying to figure it out.
Which makes sense of why you spend a little time around the TLC, because
Exactly.
TLC, I wrote a Substack post recently, TLC is we who wrestle with church. That's really what it's about.
That's
And
true. Yeah, yeah.
so, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, good, Eric. It was fun getting to know you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I wish you well as your journey continues and as you and your wife decide, children, not children. It's a big decision. It's a big step. And yeah, the questions don't go away. Our relationship with the realities can change, but the thing about formation is that your relationship with your mother, your relationship with her relationship with the witnesses, that'll always be a part of you. And
Yeah.
figuring out what you do with that, that's a big deal. So I wish you well with
Well,
that.
I appreciate you and I appreciate, letting you being available and, you didn't have to talk to me. You don't know me. So I do really appreciate all the things you do. And I just appreciate that you're out there and you're doing this kind of thing. So thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you a lot.
Well, it was wonderful to meet you, and we'll probably talk again.
Thank you. I hope so.
Okay. Take care, Eric.
Bye.
Bye bye.